Dean Gleed, my profound appreciation for this invitation to address this brilliant graduating class. I should pay tribute to your ode to compassionate statistics. Some of us like to say, in God we trust, but everybody else bring data. So I really appreciate that story that you told. I also have to thank you for your patriotic contributions to the well-being of your fellow Americans. It really should be noted that I've heard you define service as kind of a statement of belonging in a community. Well, you belong to the community of the righteous and the just for your enduring work to assure health care for all. So thank you so very much, Dean. A note of appreciation to the dedicated administrators, staff, and renowned faculty who stand up this incredibly important institution, which has produced generations of remarkable and talented servant leaders. And a salute to the parents and the family members who have traveled every single step of the journey with these accomplished students. I know that you have the tears of pride and depleted bank accounts as your witness, so congrats to that. And last, but of course certainly not least, the NYU Wagner graduating class of 2017. Now, you should applaud yourselves, but I really have to tell you graduates that I kind of feel bad for you. In some respects, you've kind of been robbed and cheated and bamboozled by NYU. I did notice that the incredible students on the other coast in USC had as their convocation speaker Will Ferrell and heard his stirring rendition of I Will Always Love You. But you're just stuck with this old political hack who's got no rhythm. So you didn't really get your money's worth. But seriously, congratulations on this remarkable accomplishment. I can't begin to imagine the accumulated hours of concentrated study and fealty to scholarship represented by this Purple Brigade. And can we talk about this purple? I feel like Prince or something standing up here. I trust that some of you will continue your formal education, but the vast majority will step from here to begin to apply your practical idealism in the worlds of government, nonprofits, and perhaps some of you might even contaminate the halls of business and finance with your sense of mission and active citizenry. I hope that some of you might even be tempted to serve as elected officials one day, however much maligned that career choice seems to be these days. Wherever you land on your journey, I'm heartened by the knowledge that my two children's lives will be shaped by policies that you advance. And Anna, this is a place where I kind of differ just a little bit with you. Standing here, looking out over this gathering, I don't see the broken places in the world anymore. I see the cure. At a time when the politics of performance threatens to trump the politics of principle, I see what the poet Seamus Heaney's prayer called, his prayer that history says, don't hope on this side of the grave. Don't hope on this side of the grave. But then, once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice might rise up, and hope and history rhyme. You are the rhyme that we'll set our futures to. While the current state of our politics can exhaust my meager metaphorical resources, I'm confident in saying that you are the scaffolding for our democratic institutions. Sure, you'll make some mistakes, we all do, but in them, you just might learn something that saves us from the wreckage of ourselves. Trust that I know a thing or two about mistakes. This appearance at this iconic Brooklyn institution isn't my first time in this neighborhood. I used to run amok in the streets right outside. I actually went to high school right down the block at Brooklyn Technical High School. But truth be told, I did a considerable amount of my learning outside of the school building. I can actually remember a time, Dean Gleed, when, I'm not too proud to say this, but I can remember a time that, thanks to my speed, I was able to evade a truant officer who was trying to track me down right outside here, and I ended up hiding behind this terracotta building right in the alleyway behind here, and I actually snuck in, and I ended up in some matinee for some New Wave festival in the middle of the afternoon while cutting school from Brooklyn Tech. There's so many ways to get an education. So there are so many ways that I am very much the same young man that I was back in those days. But there are also so many innumerable ways that life alters you beyond your own ability to recognize. I've arrived here where I've started only to know myself for the very first time. Back then, I was bitter about my sense of the unfairness of the poverty I experienced as the child of struggling immigrants, and I despaired at a future that seemed bleak and unpromising. I didn't believe in the moment because I was all too aware of the ways in which the world conspired against people like me. I was also haunted by the ghost of a father who was a young lawyer trained in Haiti, but who fled dictatorship and had to take on work beneath his training in America, a nation that supported the oppressive dictatorship that he fled from. Oh, the delicious ironies of the Cold War. This coming of age also took place against the backdrop of societal cataclysms in the US that claimed the lives of the best and the brightest, while those who had the power to make change looked on at the denigration of their brothers and sisters and did nothing. My generation lost a sea of brilliant friends to AIDS, while our government claimed other moral priorities. We saw the reduction of a living wage in a supposed age of reason, and we hungered and thirsted for righteousness, while the meekest were denied equal access to the law. As a young activist in the struggle against the racist oppression in South Africa, I grappled with the stinging knowledge that my country, the United States, jailed more black people than South Africa did at the height of apartheid, and still does. Cynicism was an easy choice. My salvation was made possible in the involvement in movements bigger than myself that pulled down my vanity and channeled my anger. I learned in my wilderness journey what President Obama articulated with such precision, that thinking about yourself, fulfilling your immediate wants and needs, betrays a poverty of ambition. I can bookend my American journey with two triumphs of organizing that reveal to me the very best of our national character. I could tell you so many stories and adventures of my time serving as ambassador, working for mayors, for presidents, and serving home care workers here in this country. But I'll tell you these two little organizing anecdotes, because for me, they reveal something fundamental. In 1986, when I was all of 19 years of age, a Republican-led Congress overrode the veto pen of the most powerful man on earth, President Ronald Reagan, and imposed sanctions against the racist regime in South Africa, making it the very first time in the 20th century that a US president was overridden on foreign policy. I understood that this occurred as a direct result of those of us who were willing to put our bodies against the gears of the odious machine to make it stop. What an affirmation for a 19-year-old. I was hooked on movement. I was hooked on collective action, which probably rather explains why I managed to escape the halls of my university without ever accomplishing what some of you have now done several times, which is to snatch a degree from the validators. 22 years later, in the autumn of 2008, I found myself in downtown St. Louis, Missouri, near the Arch, near the Mississippi River, with a skinny guy from the south side of Chicago with a funny name who had the audacity to run for president. We were in the final weeks of that historic contest, and we were in the city for an epic rally. As we alighted in the plaza that afternoon, we saw a sea of Americans from every walk of life gathered to give expression to their democratic preference. As then candidate Obama began to speak in that familiar cadence of his, I realized, because I'm something of a geek of history, I realized that about 150 yards over his shoulder and 150 yards back in the history of America, there was the old St. Louis courthouse, where those of you who know American history know that the slave Dred Scott was judged to be incapable of ever being a full-blooded citizen of the Republic. I felt in that moment time fold in upon itself in this burst of American renewal. And I cried that day in understanding that I had outlasted all the forces in this world that were determined to purge me. In the words of that great Brooklyn poet Jay-Z, I had to step out of the boat in order to walk on the water. I've recounted these two moments in my organizing life as an entry into some of what I really wanted to impart to you today in my rather pedestrian way. Things that I wish someone had shared with me early on in my arc of public service. As I know that some material success is certainly assured to you all because you're graduating from this remarkable institution and you have the nurturing of such great family members, as a result of that, I'm perhaps more focused on the tending to your spirits, the spirits that I hope will redeem the errors of my generation as you take up the unfinished work of the day. Time avails not, bemoaned that other bard of Brooklyn, Walt Whitman, who stood not very far from this very spot and looked forward to your cohort and declared at the crossing into Brooklyn, "I am with you, you men and women of a generation or ever so many generations hence." I too felt the curious, abrupt questionings stir within me. The abrupt questionings. I want to address your abrupt questionings. So here are the musings of a boy from a lost generation who hopes with a ferocity that your class will leave behind a more humane earth than the one that we are turning over to you. I'll ask you to carry a few trinkets away from my trunk. As public servants, there are just a few things I want to ask of you all. I want to ask you to remember always that those who are in positions of power are counting on your cynicism as it lowers the bar of achievement for them. Remember that public anger has its uses, but that isolation in anger is toxic and makes the world small. Remember that progress is not assured in social justice, and that history is not linear, and that we have to impose our wills upon it. Remember that even as we all praise your scholarship today, all that you've studied is a thimble bobbing in an ocean of the unknowable. Let your learning be a key in the door to a life of thoughtful conversation and engagement. To paraphrase former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, it should never be the case that your opinion is the end of a conversation instead of its beginning. I will not tell you here today to trust your gut. Everyone tells you to trust your gut. I won't tell you to trust your gut. I will tell you that the state the world is in today demands that you interrogate that gut and that you always nurture a passionate curiosity. Our political culture insists that we celebrate action and deride thoughtfulness and introspection. I was proudest to serve with a president whose words excited reflection. As leaders, please pause between the incessant buzzing of your Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter feeds and be attuned to a pulsation of things much greater than the self. And know that finding the human tears in the things around us is an uncommon joy that tethers you to every other being on this globe. Remember that service to others is the only true leadership that has legacy. And that last note is a lesson that I learned over and over again and needs to continue to reverberate even in my heart. I found my way back to that lesson not that long ago. About a year ago, I was down in Atlanta, Georgia. I was speaking at a conference, and if I do say so, I gave a pretty good speech. I was proud of myself and feeling really good that day. My ego was walking into the room before I did. As is my wont, anytime I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, I always go and visit the King Center in Atlanta. So I went down into the church that he used to preach from. I sat in one of the pews that he used to command and looked up at that magnificent pulpit, and through the magic and wonder of endless loop tapes that they have there, Dr. King's voice came into the room in that rolling thunder of his and struck me dead. I heard his voice roll in and say, "And the greatest among you shall be a servant." Everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You don't have to know Einstein's theory of relativity to serve. You don't have to know the second theory of thermonuclear dynamics to serve. All you need is a heart generated by love. You can be that servant. My ego was put in its place. So yes, indeed, you can be that servant. Service begins with the recognition of the greatness of others and the desire to lift it up. Here, I'm reminded of the hymn by the Indian poet Tagore, who wrote, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and learned that life is service. I acted, and behold, service is joy." So congratulations, Wagner class of 2017. Dare to make hope and history rhyme and always be in service of your highest self. Thank you.